Hello and welcome back to episode 10 of Red Brick Recap, coming at you again with another special episode. This week we are joined by yet another member of the Miami basketball program, or soon to be member of Miami basketball program, I should say. Please welcome Trey Perry to the stage. Trey, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for doing this. For those of our viewers who don't know, do you want to give yourself a quick little introduction of who you are, where you're from, and all that good stuff?
Got you. My name is Trey Perry. I'm a class of 2025 point guard. I'm from Liberty Township, Ohio. I go to Lakota East High School right now. I'm currently a senior.
Awesome. Well, Trey, thank you again for coming on the show. We're really excited to see you play for Miami in the future. And so let's jump right in. So you received a couple offers from other MAC schools before committing to Miami. What was it about the Red Hawk program that made you decide to come to Oxford over some of these other programs?
Good question. For me, I'm a family-based person, so when it felt like family at Miami, it really did. I had a connection with them for a long time. Even before the recruiting process, I know Coach Richburg since I was little. So that right there, having that relationship since a young age. Growing up in the MBB at a school that's close to home, building that really made me feel like it was home at Miami.
And go ahead, Ted.
Well, I'll just go down our list of questions. But what stuck out to you specifically about Coach Steele and his staff that led you to want to join the program? You talked a little bit about your relationship with Carl, but what about the other staff members really made it stick out to you?
For me, they're hilarious dudes, man. It's fun around. Like on my official visit, it was never a dull moment. We're always laughing, always joking. You got a lot of dynamics on the staff. Coach Smith, he's a real competitor. Like when we're around, he always trying to compete, always talking trash. Coach Holmes thinks he can beat me at horse. I beat him with my left hand. He can't beat me at horse, but it's always fun to be around them guys. Coach Eli, he cool, so it's cool.
Well, I'm not sure if you watched any of the game last night, but or at all last season. But what do you think you specifically bring to the program? Obviously, outside of your scoring ability, I mean, what was it, 23 points a game last season? Outside of that, what do you think you bring to this program?
For me, I bring a competitor. If I'm not scoring, I'm always feel like I'm gonna be there, a leader for my teammates. I'm gonna compete on defense. I'm gonna be the guy that just brings the spark off, whether it's on the bench, whether I'm starting, no matter what. I'm always gonna bring the spark, no matter where I'm at.
What do you think the biggest point of emphasis to improve upon going into your senior season is? What is the one thing you're really trying to hone in before you get into the college ranks?
Okay. So, I mean, for me, this year being a senior at Lakota East, we had like 8 seniors leave last year. So we got a ton of young guys, a ton of talented young guys. So for me, it's being that experienced leader on the team and just leading them and giving them every piece of knowledge that I have, going into the season. Because, them guys ain't never played, but we only have one other guy coming into the season that played varsity minutes last year. And then he actually tore his ACL. So he not with us no more. Then we got a guy that's playing football right now that actually played, some minutes last year. So we have one guy, another guy that played football that actually played substantial minutes last year. So in terms of that, them guys ain't never been there before. So it's just leading for them. And that's just with the senior season this year. And then coming into college, it's going to be more so just honing in on my game, making sure I'm the most confident I can be going into college.
Well, speaking of college, last season, the Red Hawks gave Makai Cooper and Evan Osaro some major minutes. And then obviously yesterday they had Luke Skaljak come off the bench a little bit. All of these guys are younger guys. All of them were freshmen in their opening seasons. Is that a factor of why you chose this program, is the faith they place in these young guards? Or is that something you didn't think about?
For sure. I mean, I definitely felt comfortable because of the family aspect first. But then when I started to get down to how they play, I mean, they play 3 guards. You know what I'm saying? So, and they all told me that they're gonna play 3 guards, and it's like you always gonna have to earn the spot. But I know the opportunity is gonna be there. So that also factored into my choice for sure. But earning that spot and also having that knowledge that the coach gonna play 3 guards and play freshmen is another big reason as well.
What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned so far in your young career that you think will translate over into the college game?
Definitely being a freshman, when I come in, they're all going to be older, they're going to be juniors, seniors. So, when I was a freshman, I also had to do the same thing. When I was a freshman, there was no other juniors. There was only seniors. So it was just like, learning that early on about, being the little dude, still fighting, still being aggressive has made me, part of the mindset I have today about, just how I am as a person, as I am as a basketball player, is just like having that, getting beat on every day in practice, getting beat up, getting, back screen, just having that early on is what, has like built like a chip on my shoulder coming into a situation where
So I did a little bit of research before we started. Your freshman year, I think it was you guys won 20 games.
Yeah.
And you're coming into a program now that's looking to kind of take that next step and try to go into that 20-game win mark for college basketball. How do you think you'd come in and contribute to winning right away? We've already talked about like the competitive spirit that you bring and obviously the scoring, but like, how do you think that you contribute to a winning culture?
I definitely feel like, in a winning culture, you got to have someone that competes all the time. You got to have someone that just brings it every day. You got to have someone that also leads in his own way, and whether that's by example or whether that's by voice. And I feel like that's what I can contribute to, a winning program.
Is there a person or an event that kind of sticks out in your mind that has had the biggest impact on your playing career?
That is a great question. Oh my gosh. For me, I gotta. Ooh, okay. There's been a couple. When you've been playing for so long, you have a couple that kind of just stick out to you and help you teach lessons. But I say for me, the biggest one early on was my freshman year. Being a guy like they were all like my freshman year. Them dudes were college. They were college like built. Like they were just every day in practice. I would go home bloody lip, bruised up. So like I felt like going through that so early, like that really like let me know what was going to be in the future, whether that it was in college or whether that was the following years. I also had a couple experiences in AAU playing with top ranked guys, top dogs that also are playing for scholarships, trying to go to college, having different egos on the team and managing them. Being the point guard, you kind of have to figure out how to manage all those on the team. So I just felt like, with them two examples, I felt like that has definitely helped me prepare me for what's soon to come at Miami.
So, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. Outside of basketball, obviously, I've been at Miami now for 5 years. Ted's been here for 4 years, so we know all about Oxford. But what specifically about Oxford and Miami are you looking forward to seeing when you get here, or looking forward to about being a part of when you get here?
Definitely the campus. I mean, the campus is pretty. Definitely just being in a situation for me, I'm a gym rat. So I feel like, I'll be able to go to the gym whenever, I'll be able to walk around campus. I like riding bikes, that's probably going to be my way of transport when I get there, just driving around, riding around the campus, doing that, being in the gym whenever, going to get, whether it's going to hang out, just chilling for sure.
Have you been able to talk to any of the other guys who have committed alongside you? So some of the names like Justin Kirby, LaShawn Stowers. I mean, a big freshman class is coming in again. That's another big thing. But have you been able to talk to any of those guys? Start creating some text chains, some chemistry coming in.
For sure. I actually talked to the other Tyler and Kyle. I didn't talk to them as much because they were, they kind of committed around the same time as me. But once us three committed, I definitely talked to LaShawn, and Justin is like, I tried to reach out to Justin. He act like he Hollywood. He don't answer his phone. But LaShawn, I talked to him a lot. I let him know what we got building over at Miami, and I just wanted him to be a part of it because I was on his official visit. I went up there and played with him. And that's when I met him, and that's when I started to build that relationship. And then I came back for when you guys played UC, and Justin Kirby was there on his unofficial. I think it was his unofficial, and that's when I met him and talked to him and told him that he needed to come and join the squad.
Sweet.
Good stuff.
Well, what would in, let's say, like 2 or 3 sentences, what do Miami fans have to look forward to when you start playing here? What should you be? What is your advertisement out of your game to send to Miami fans today?
A competitor, and I would say I'm a competitor, and I'm gonna bring the energy.
I love that. All right. Well, Ted, do you have anything else?
No. I mean, I think we hit everything. I mean, I think we're really excited for Trey to get on campus. I mean, we won't be on campus when you end up getting here, Trey, but we'll obviously be watching from afar and keeping tabs on it. And man, I'm excited to see you play.
I appreciate it.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for joining the show. We really appreciate you coming on. And enjoy your senior season, and we look forward to seeing you in Oxford next season.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Well, thank you to Trey Perry once again for coming on the show. To some of our eagle-eyed viewers, as you can tell, we are not in the same outfits as we were before. We recorded that interview a little while ago, and we were waiting on the results of the games this week to talk about before we recorded the rest of the episode. So huge thanks to Trey. Congratulations to all of the Miami freshmen for signing. National Signing Day was yesterday. So congratulations to the 4 guys who signed, and congratulations to 5 guys who signed. And congratulations to all the athletes in all other sports that signed to come to Miami as well. Let's jump right in. It's been a busy week of sports here at Miami. A lot has gone on, and a lot has taken place over the last week. Let's start with field hockey. The first team this season to participate in an NCAA tournament started off their NCAA tournament run with a win over Vermont on, was it Wednesday? It was yesterday. Defeated Vermont 2-1 in the round of 32, and will face Northwestern tomorrow in Evanston in the round of 16. I'm going to hopefully try and make it up to that game. I'm going to be in Chicago over the weekend, so I might try and sneak up to Evanston, catch that game. Yeah, Ted, anything to add about this field hockey run?
I mean, hey, they continue to show why they're one of the best teams on our campus. I mean, they continue to just blow away our expectations, and some of the players on the team, like first one that comes to mind is Claudia Negrete Garcia. She's been on this team for what feels like forever. And this is it for her. If I remember correctly, I don't think she has any more years of eligibility left. But this is it for her. So she's playing for her collegiate career right now, and I'm sure that probably weighs on her a little bit. But yeah, I mean, these teams these field hockey teams have both been really, really good. So glad to see that they are continuing to play well throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, I've been racking my brain while I've been sitting here. I can't remember the last time any Miami team, probably outside of field hockey, has gone to like a Sweet 16 or a round of 16 game. Because I know basketball hasn't in probably close to 20 years.
Yeah,
and I'm sure some of our other programs may have in the last couple of years. But off the top of my head, I think this is the furthest a Miami team has gone in recent memory. So good luck to them on Friday. Facing a Big Ten opponent will always be a tough game. But yeah, let's move on to hockey. Tough weekend series on the road against a ranked team. I don't know about you. I didn't go into this weekend with too high of expectations, considering St. Cloud State's always a very good program. It's still a first year under a new coach. Still, as we talked about last week, still trying to figure out the identity of this team. Still trying to figure out how this team's going to operate. And I think an encouraging sign is that both of these games are close. These were not blowouts by any means. So I think obviously the results on the ice weren't what we wanted, but there was progress on the ice in going to a program like St. Cloud and competing. Yeah,
we've talked about it with Joe. It's this is when it starts to get real for Miami. This is when the tier of opponents goes up another level. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a bit where the team's going to ride the struggle bus a little bit, for lack of a better analogy. But like you said, there was progress. Being able to go up to St. Cloud State and lose in overtime, at least on the first night, and what I've seen from the first night games, those are the much harder games. Those are the games where both teams are sending out their top lineups. Whereas the second game, they may throw in their backup goalie, or they may throw in a couple guys who haven't gotten a ton of burn yet. But yeah, I mean, Friday was a tough loss for sure. You would have loved to seen it go Miami's way, but you're absolutely right. There are good signs that the team is able to compete with some of the higher teams in their conference.
Yeah, I think you talked very briefly about the goalie situation. I think it's going to be an interesting storyline to follow as we kind of get into NCHC play is who is going to be this number one, who is going to be like, for lack of like, I'm going to use a baseball term here, like who's going to be the ace, who's going to be the guy who you can rely on in between the sticks, because they're still splitting time between Breveris and Dalmier. Both were good on over the weekend. Breveris especially shut out 2 periods and had a rough second, but both of these guys have been performing well. So how do you differentiate? How do you decide who's going to be the number one for the majority of games? Or is it going to be this kind of tandem system we're seeing? I think that's going to be interesting to follow over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, like you said, I think that Noreen is still probably playing a little too. He's playing a little too quarterback system, as I said last week with the John Madden quote is like, you can't have 2 good quarterbacks and expect to win. You need to have 1 great quarterback, and I think that's what we're seeing here. Is like Dalmier is starting to kind of pull away with the race, and I think they should lean on Dalmier a little bit more. Maybe go 2 games of Dalmier and then a game of Breveris, and then 2 games of Dalmier, a game of Breveris. And I don't want to say it's shocking, but it's a little like, okay, Breveris played well last year, all things considered. Like, he was a good goaltender, and I wonder where the loss of confidence comes in. Maybe it's because it's a new coach. Maybe it's he just doesn't know Coach Noreen all that well. But the hope is that one of them can really just solidify themselves in net. And I mean, look, there are big shoes to fill with Ludwig Pearson moving on 2 years ago to North Dakota. Like that, I mean, that's not a goaltender you want leaving. But yeah, hopefully one of them can step up.
Yeah, well, we'll see this weekend. They have a home set against Minnesota Duluth at Goggin. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the start on which night and how they deal with the goaltender situation. These are the games that matter. So obviously a sweep would be ideal, but I think as a fan, I think 1 win over this weekend would be a huge step in the right direction for this program. But let's jump into soccer now. The second program that is entered, or I guess not entered, but that got to the postseason. Sadly, their season ended on Sunday after a narrow loss to Kent State in the MAC quarterfinals. But there were a lot of positives to talk about. We've talked throughout the season how they've gone undefeated at home. I think it's like a 12 or 13 game streak now where they haven't been defeated at Bobby Cramick Field. So that's a streak to be proud of. And I think that gives this program a lot to build on going into next season. Like anytime a program makes the postseason, that should be seen as somewhat of a success.
Yeah, absolutely. They had a good season, all things considered. I mean, they were able to get into the playoffs. That's always a big thing for Miami soccer, getting into the playoffs. And they made it, MAC quarterfinals. It's always fun. But yeah, we kind of joked around about it. We wish that Miami was able to host the quarterfinal game because they were unbeaten at home. Like that's a great stat.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Taylor Hamlet, 10 goals, which is the most in program as far as the stats go back. But yeah, I mean it was a good season, and hopefully they can build on it next year.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Taylor Hamlet was undoubtedly the star of the show for this team. I looked as far back as the records go. The highest I saw outside of 10 was like 6 or 5 since 2018. So pretty outstanding goal tally for her. And then finally, the last sport we're going to talk about before we jump into men's basketball is volleyball. It's not been smooth sailing. We've talked all year how it's kind of a transition year. It's a new coach. It's a lot of players kind of in transition between like the old regime and the new regime. But I don't think there's just not a whole lot of positives to take out is what I'm trying to say. I mean, we're looking at 4 consecutive sweeps for 3-0 losses. They haven't won since October 18th, and they're 1-15 in conference play. So it's been a rough year. There's just not a whole lot of positives to take away from that team this season.
Yeah, I don't really know where they go from here. Obviously it's rebuilding. They got to figure out a way to get talent into Miami. I think that's the biggest thing is hopefully Gwit can be a very good recruiter I as much as I liked Caroline Condon, I think it was time to move on. I think the game has changed enough where, especially with recruiting tactics, I think they needed a fresh new voice in that locker room. They needed somebody to help kind of get them past the hump. And obviously, look, it's tough, but in what's in what's called a quote unquote rebuilding year, the fact that they're basically matching the win totals from the last 4, 5, 6 seasons of Carolyn Condon, I think that's an okay sign. If we're trying to find positives, is like, look, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah,
could be a lot worse.
very true. Well, let's jump right into the sport that got the most action over the past week, and that's men's basketball. 2 games over the past week. First off, let's start with the weekend's matchup against Wright State. Obviously, I couldn't be there. I was in Washington with my brother. Ted was there. Ted, give us the rundown of how this game went. What went wrong for the Red Hawks?
Oh, this game frustrated me. It really, really frustrated me. Simply put, in the last 6 minutes of the game, outworked, out-hustled, outplayed. This is a team that we know can be really, really good. We saw it in the App State game when they were connected on defense, when they had the ability to switch and they had the ability to really play with each other. They are a very good defensive unit, a very good offensive unit too. And it's bad when Coach Steele on the Saturday press conference says Friday before the game was the worst practice he's ever had at Miami. That is not a good sign going into Saturday's game. He said he was talking to his wife, and she said that she always asked how practice was, and he said it was the worst practice I've ever had at Miami, frankly. The defensive effort was not there. They were missing wide open layups. Nothing was going right, and Coach Steele knew going into Saturday it was going to be a long day. And he put it quite frankly, like they were kind of lucky to keep it close for as long as they did. So it was not good. All the connectivity that you saw in App State wasn't there. The defensive intensity was not great. And these are all things that Coach Steele has said. So I don't want people to think like I'm ragging on it. Like this is straight from the press conference. We try to be as impartial as we can be on this show. But this is all from press conference and things like that. So it wasn't a good practice. But talking about the game itself, like they were in it until the last 6 minutes of the game. They were down 3 points with 6 to play, and then all of a sudden Wright State goes on an 11-0 run in the last in 4 minutes, and then next thing you know, Miami's down 14 with 2 minutes to play, and that's a tribute to Wright State and the way that they play. Look, good teams know how to wear down their opponents, and Wright State is really, really good at doing that. For those who don't know, Wright State currently this season is ranked 24th in pace, and they were 22nd last year in pace. And pace is how many possessions your team gets per 40 minutes, and 40 minutes is obviously how long the games are. So they average about 72 possessions a game, which is obviously on the higher end of the spectrum. Miami is tied for 235th in the country currently, which, to put it in perspective, it's tied with teams like Mercer, who they could possibly play in Fort Myers, and Maryland Eastern Shore, who they just played. And they only average about 67.5 possessions per game. So if you think about it, that's a 5-possession difference, which if they score on every possession, if they score a field goal on every possession, that's 10 to 15. That's a 10 to 15 point swing between the two teams. It's attributed to how quickly Wright State gets up and down the floor, and Miami's transition defense didn't look good, and obviously their half-court defense didn't look good. But they had a really, really tough time playing transition defense, and the numbers don't show that. They only had 9 transition points. But if you look at the game tape, Miami is scrambling. They're trying to figure stuff out, and it was not working. And it kind of plagued them again in the Maryland Eastern Shore game, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But when they can set up their defense, they have a pretty solid defense. They're ranked 165th in the country, which is 4th in the MAC. Like, they're a good defensive unit. It's really just about setting up and getting to their spots. And if I'm Travis Steele, I am working on transition defense for the next however many days. Like it's got to improve. It's got to improve. And I wish I had the advanced analytic stats pulled up, but it's got to improve.
Yeah, I was just looking at the matchup history because I remember Coach Steele saying something about how this team just Wright State, they just haven't beaten Wright State in
6 years.
6 years. Yeah. So this is a bogey team for Miami. This is a team that always gives the Red Hawks a run for their money. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like if the transition defense isn't there, if the half court defense isn't there, it's going to make for a tough season. I think we'll talk about it in a second, as you said, but I think it was better against Maryland Eastern Shore. I do think there's definitely room for improvement, especially because in parts of that game, it turned into a bit of a track race where it was kind of a 7 seconds offense on both sides, where teams were just kind of trucking up shots, not really setting up an offense. And I think if we get into games like that in MAC play, we can definitely get burned by that, because there were stretches of that game, which again, we'll go into more depth in a second, but where it felt like they couldn't miss. And it felt like Miami just was completely scrambling on defense. So I think that you're absolutely right in that Coach Steele should be working on transition defense. And if they can get that aspect of the game shored up a little bit, I think it creates a much better defensive system that they can build around going into the rest of the season.
In the App State game, Miami absolutely got burned by their own shooting. Really, they got burned by getting out of their system. And one of the things that you notice from that box score is in the first half, I think they shot 48 or close to 50% on 3-point attempts. Second half, they shot 2 of 11. 2 of 11. And this is something that we talked about in the App State recap, is that they can't fall in love with the 3-pointer, especially if it's not falling. And look, this team is meant to shoot the ball, but you're not, at some point you got to say, okay, we got to get an easy bucket. We got to get something to get our confidence back up. And, Pete Suter didn't have his best game shooting the ball. And I mean, it was really Ian Elmer who I thought was the only one who looked good shooting the ball. Cam Kraft, he had a really good first half. I think he had 17 or 18 points in the first half, and then he finished with 23. So he only scored about 6 or 5 in the second half, which kind of shows you just the shooting woes of that team. And there were points where I thought Miami got really, really out of system, and Kraft kind of tried to take it upon himself to shoot his team out of a funk and shoot his team back into the game. And I think Wright State knew that as well. And it was like, okay, if he wants to play hero ball, we'll let him play hero ball. Let's just take away everybody else. And Clint Sargent, who is the head coach over at Wright State, it's his first season, but for the past 6 seasons, he's been an associate head coach for Wright State. Credit to him defensively for recognizing that and saying, okay, if he wants to do this, fine, let one person beat us. Because on the other end, they're offensively for Wright State, it was Brandon Noel and Alex Huber-Gatesy. And I mean, those were the two guys who put up big numbers, but everybody else, the ball was getting moved around. Everybody seemed like they were tied together on a string. Like everybody was moving so together that it was good. I mean, it's hard for any defense to stop. And credit to Brandon Noel and Alex Huber-Gatesy. Brandon Noel, let me just tell you the stat line for a second. He put up 27 points and 16 rebounds with one foul. Foul as a big man.
Play.
And I'll get into a little bit more in a second. But Alex Huber-Gatesy was the fire to Noel's ice. Like he had 26 points by himself. Like, ouch. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Noel, he's a great player. There's a reason he was a former Horizon League Freshman of the Year. There's a reason that he's up for Horizon League Player of the Year this year. Like he is really, really good. And I mean, you saw it. Like he only got one foul, and he drew what felt like 6. I mean, Antoine Woolfolk and Jackson Kentucky, they both picked up 3 fouls in the first half. And they had no Reese Potter, so it's already really thin as it is. And then Miami was forced to put Ian Elmer at the 5, which, look, the analytics say really positive minutes. However, it's a very small sample size. I think it was 3 to 5 minutes. So the sample size is really, really small.
Yeah.
But I don't think Miami wants to continue to play Elmer at the 5. They'd rather have him at the 3 or the 4, or even the 2 in some like large, some at-large situations. But Miami, and we can kind of start transitioning into the UMass game, or not UMass. We can't call them UMass. It's UMES. That is what they said in their notes, in their game notes. So I apologize to UMES. But one of the things that Coach Steele talked about after the UMES game was the refs are not going to call fouls for Miami if they're shying away from contact. If they lean into the contact, they're going to get more calls. A lot of these calls are 50-50, and the first thing that you see these Miami players do is kind of whip their head around and go, "Where's the foul call?" Refs aren't calling that if you're asking for it. But if you go strong and you take it up strong, and I mean, they're going to be more inclined to call it. And I mean, you saw it with foul discrepancy in the Wright State game, in the UMES game. Like, Miami's going to have to figure out a way to get to the line more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we saw it. A key example would be Casey Shaw. We'll talk about UMES. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I'm sure Brandon Noel had plenty of free throws as well. These guys are adept at creating contact and finishing through that contact at the rim, especially from what I saw on Tuesday's game. Casey Shaw I don't think he shot a single shot from more than like 20 feet out. Like, most of his shot, he shot 2 threes and made one of them. But apart from that, he was an expert on starting on the left wing, driving to the middle, driving to almost the free throw line, rising for a jump shot, either hitting the jump shot, pump faking, and going in for a layup and getting a foul. In that game, Shaw shot 10 free throws by himself. And yeah, he only made 6 of them, so the impact wasn't crazy, but Miami only shot 6 total. And you said it best. I mean, that's something that Coach Steele talked about after the game, that fouls are not going to be called if you're ducking contact. If you're trying to avoid contact, you're not going to get the call. And I think we saw it a little bit from Antoine Woolfolk. He was trying to fight through the contact a little bit more than the rest of the team was, but that's something that I think you're absolutely right, has to be addressed going forward, is trying to get more physical. Don't shy away from contact. Lean into it. Make yourself a presence. And I think that if they're able to do that, that makes them such a very different force on the offensive side of the ball. I also want to say in both of these games, there's been like 1 or 2 offensive focal points that Miami hasn't really been able to take away. So I think going forward, like trying to take away the first option and forcing it to the second or third option has to be a point of emphasis. We saw it on Saturday with Noel, and then obviously Hooper Getzy. It was the same deal against UMES. Casey Shaw was the clear first option. He played all 40 minutes and shot 66% on 15 shots. And Cardell Bailey was the second option. It was kind of the fire and ice situation where Shaw was going into the post, going into the paint, and then Bailey was sitting on the outside waiting for the perimeter shot if they needed a kick out. And they combined for just as many points. It was 27 and 21. So not quite as many, but it's the same kind of drive and kick offense that has been working for teams against Miami that I think needs to be addressed before we get into obviously a tough game on Monday, but I think needs to be addressed before, especially we get into MAC play.
So here's what I'll say about UMES, and I'm gonna give a lot of credit to Coach Steele and his coaching staff, because they did exactly what I would have expected them to do in this situation. There were 2 guys going into this game where you said we cannot let them beat us together, and it was Casey Shaw and Christopher Flippin. This season he's averaging 24, or before going into this game in 3 games, he's averaging 24 points and 13 rebounds. He has had a double-double in all 3 of his games. In this game, 8 points, 6 rebounds, 5 fouls. They did not let Flippin beat him. And I think that's why you see this huge uptick in shots for Shaw, because he's like, okay, I got to carry the offense. And look, Cardell Bailey, I give him a lot of credit. He had an incredible game. I mean, 50% from 3-point land. He shot 5 of 8 free throws, 6 of 11 overall. Miami's going to live with that to a degree. They're going to live with letting somebody who they don't necessarily expect to win the game, they're going to live with that. And I think we saw that. It's like, look, was Steele annoyed with some of the defensive effort on Shaw or on Bailey? Yes, but it's not like Bailey was hitting 3-pointers that were right at the line. He's taking them from Hamilton, Ohio. Like he's pulling up from 5-6 feet beyond the arc, and being at that game and being able to work that game for ESPN Plus was was an absolute privilege just to be around and listen to kind of some of these things. So I don't think there's necessarily too much of an issue. I mean, in his press conference, Coach Steele said that Casey Shaw is one of the best guards they'll face all year. He can play anywhere. If he wanted to, he could play anywhere. And I think we saw that. I mean, Casey Shaw was just an absolute. I mean, he was just absolutely incredible. But overall, I mean, Miami did a good job, and they found something that worked towards the end of the game with the breakout player of the game. They put Ian Elmer on him for the last, I think it was 7, 8, 9 minutes of the game, face guarding him, denying the ball. Casey Shaw could not get free at all.
Yeah.
And, you wonder like what would have happened if they had maybe tried to figure that out sooner. But you know what? That's what in-game adjustments are for. And credit to this staff for figuring out an in-game adjustment. And that really allowed Miami to pull away and hold their lead.
Yeah, there's a clear spot in the game where I think that adjustment was made, and I think it was around the 12-minute mark, because I have it here. The last 8 minutes and 41 seconds of the game, Miami ended on a 23-4 run. Before that point, this was very much a one-score game. Whoever was getting the last bucket was going to win the ball game. And I think that you're absolutely right that adjustment, putting Elmer on Shaw, completely changed their offense, completely changed how UMES wanted to run their offense. And I mean, you see it in the numbers. I mean, 6-0 run in the last minute and a half, a 23-4 run really says it all right there. And I think a lot of that's also, we talked about Elmer on defense, but he also scored 14 straight points on offense. Like everything that Miami did successfully in the last 10 minutes ran through Ian Elmer. Everything it seemed like we said in the press conference too, but everything he touched seemed to turn to goal. He was everywhere. I mean, the 14 points in the last 8 minutes, or 14 straight points in a 3-minute stretch. And it was it wasn't one move either. It was a nice offensive. I'm going to say a word that the kids use, but a nice offensive bag to go with. Like he was hitting from 3. He was getting open. He was able to drive to the rim. He was hitting tough layups. It was a nice variety of scoring methods that we really hadn't seen from a lot of Miami players. Like every player we've seen so far this year kind of has one shtick that they've gone to, and it's worked for them. Obviously, Kraft has pretty much relied on the shooting from the perimeter. Elmer is kind of the only Suter's been able to kind of get to the middle and take short shots from there. And obviously, Woolfolk operates primarily in the post. He did actually step out and hit a 3, so credit to him.
Yes, sir. That was a thing of beauty.
I did not expect to see that, but has primarily operated in the post. Elmer is one of the few guys, I don't want to say the only guy, but one of the few guys that has the ability to kind of make all of these shots consistently at a high level. And I think he showed it. Obviously, the 24 points is the number that sticks out, but also 9 rebounds. Like his athleticism on the defensive glass and on the offensive glass was paramount to this team's success. And we saw it courtside, like where the press row was. We had a great view of his rebounding ability. It just felt like he was jumping out of the gym at times. He was just simply jumping higher than everybody else, which obviously helps if you're going for rebounds. But for a guy in a 6'6" frame going against a guy like Flippin, who's 6'8", and Jalen Ware, who I think is around 6'8", 6'9", like he was able to out-jump these guys and pull down these boards that kind of set the tone on the glass for Miami.
That was probably one of my favorite things to watch, was Ian Elmer going up and grabbing just grappling it away from some of these players, and it's his wingspan that really allows him to do that, where he's able to, I mean, he's got an incredible jumping ability, but he's able to just snatch it. There was one where he just went up, he grabbed it with one arm, and then as he's coming down, puts the second arm over it, and Flippin gets called for an over the back. And it's like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like, like that doesn't happen. That's not natural. But I mean, the thing I want to highlight for Ian Elmer was his shooting ability. 5 of 7 from beyond the arc. Last year, he kind of came in and he was very raw with shooting the ball. And Steele said it in his press conference. He was like, the first workout that he ever had at Miami, he was like, wow, Elmer's got a ways to go. And then they mentioned this on the broadcast, but like Elmer was not the best shooter last year. He was not this all realm shooter that we saw. But credit to him this summer, he really, really worked on his shooting. And I mean, it's starting to pay off. He had a good shooting night the other night. And in the first game, he had a great shooting night against UMES. Like, I mean, just absolutely incredible. And the whole team overall, they shot 47% from the 3-point line. Like that's what you want to see out of your team, especially, ones that are designed to shoot well. And I mean, I just want to talk about the rebounding efforts for this team. One of the things that Coach Steele has really emphasized is second chance points and offensive rebounds. I mean, you want to talk about offensive rebounds: 1, 5, 1, 2, 2, 1. Like that's 14 offensive rebounds, 5 from Woolfolk, 1 from Elmer, and then 2 little guys got in there. Ipsaro and Cooper both got 2 offensive rebounds, and they both got them the same exact way. They got one on a long rebound. I mean, Ipsaro had a putback layup of all people, and Makai Cooper almost had a putback dunk. I mean, it was crazy because him and Woolfolk both went for it, and Cooper got it, and it was almost like Woolfolk blocked him a little bit because Cooper tried to slam it home, and it bounced off the rim, and I was like, holy moly! I mean, Makai Cooper, that was out of nowhere. He didn't score, but I mean, Makai Cooper, he didn't score, but he was everywhere. I mean, he did everything else that he needed to do. Like, and this was a very complete team win, and that's what I think you want to see this season is these team wins where everybody's doing their part. I mean, Kraft had 18, Woolfolk had 14 and 8, near double. Like, it was a very, very complete team win.
Yeah, I obviously, like, a lot of the talk's going to be around Elmer's performance. It's career. I think it's a career high in points for him.
Career high,
and
yep.
I said it before the season started. I think Elmer has the potential to be like an all-MAC level player if he's able to kind of take that next step. And I think we're seeing what that next step looks like. But I think you're absolutely right that this was a great team when eight players scored. Every player bar Makai Cooper, who did literally everything else, who played more than 10 minutes, got on the score sheet. And the only player that didn't get more than 10 minutes was Reese Potter, who's still kind of easing his way back from an injury of some kind. So we're seeing the depth that this team has. And we talked with Jackson about it before the season started. We've talked with each other about it. There is not one player in this rotation, and at least who played against UMES, who can't go off and who can't break out and have this kind of monster performance that Elmer had. Like, if Woolfolk's able to give this kind of 14 and 8 near double performance on a consistent basis, he can be an all-MAC level player. Cam Kraft, Tim thinks he's going to be the MAC player of the year. And if he keeps scoring at this level, we can see that. Peter Suter, we talked about as kind of the Swiss Army knife role, and he's proving that he can perform that. We're seeing these guys perform their roles and doing it at a very high level. I also want to talk quickly about like the passing performance, because obviously we talked rebounding and scoring, and both of those were also impressive, but 20 assists and 10 turnovers, that's a pretty good ratio to have, especially early in the season when turnovers were kind of a major issue at the start of the season last season. So everyone at the ball, I mean, we saw it in certain possessions, like the ball was moving really crispy. They found the open man. A lot of those 3-pointers that they made, the 47% of them were wide open and weren't really super contested. So this kind of passing performance mixed in with the scoring and the rebounding is really, really encouraging just 3 games into the season for a team that kind of struggled in the rebounding and turnovers area last season.
Yeah, absolutely. And there, I'll say 2 things to kind of finish this off here. I'll give a little quick recap or quick preview of the Michigan game, because we are getting close to time, and we still got to talk about football.
Yeah,
crazy that we've been able to talk this yap this much about basketball. But a quick preview for the Michigan game on Monday. Here are my 4 keys to the game. Don't shy away from contact offensively. Play aggressively. You're going up to Ann Arbor. Already you're not going to get a ton of calls. So you don't look for them. Don't hunt for calls. Go and just play and take contact. Play within your system. Stick to what you know. Don't try to let Michigan determine how you're going to play. Just stick to what you know. Play your system. Don't run a 2-3 defense. This is me kind of talking to the coaches from the analytics that I get from one of the guys who works for the team. The 2-3 isn't working. The defensive possessions have not been fun. I'll kind of leave it at that because I could talk about it all day. But and then on defense, close out hard, play hard defense, get back on defense. Michigan is not a top team in pace, but they're not exactly slow with the ball. So, and they're going to be super athletic too. Like, I mean, this is Big Ten basketball. So you're going to have to keep up with them. And then we've talked a lot about the men's basketball team, but just a quick shout out to the women's basketball team. They clawed back from like a 20-point deficit to lose by 4. They played Xavier. It was really, really tough because it is Xavier. I think that's like their first win against Miami in a really long time, or just their first win in general in a really long time. But Miami played a really good game. They were able to claw back from 20 points. That's something that you didn't really see last year. You didn't really see a lot of comebacks. And I know they fell short, but that's really good momentum going into, continuing the season. They play Tiffin tonight at 5 p.m. So hopefully they can move to 2-1, come out with a W there.
Yeah, let's hope both of our teams end 2-1 before we go into next week. We've got about 15 minutes left here, so let's talk some football. Just one word about this Kent State game on Maction last night. Gross. Just a gross game. The weather was gross. It was kind of a sloppy performance from Miami. Granted, they still won, and they still won in pretty comfortable fashion, but I think even Coach Martin said, like, the first half, they were not playing up to their full potential. They're not playing up to their full talents. And I think they kind of recognized that and really turned it on in the second half, especially the defense, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think the weather played a massive, massive role in this ball game. I mean, from the first, I think it was like within the first 10 minutes, the rain was coming down, and it was coming down hard. And it made passing the ball much more challenging than it would have been otherwise. I just want to start in the first Kent State touchdown. Obviously, the fumble was unfortunate, but I thought Kent State, for the first 5 minutes, looked like they were really going to threaten Miami, and I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of the Miami players that I think Keon Mosey said it in the postgame, maybe didn't take Kent State super serious because the fact that they were 0-9, because the fact they hadn't led a game. They led against Miami granted, it was only for a couple minutes, but they did take the lead on a really nice play design. I don't know what defense Miami was in, but Kent State was able to isolate Matt Salopek on Krishan McCray, who I talked about being a very underrated receiver, a very good receiver on maybe not a very good football team. And they isolated Krishan McCray on Matt Salopek. And we've talked about it, or I've talked about it, especially after the Notre Dame game. If you get Matt Salopek running backwards in pass coverage, that's not what he's good at. That's not his bread and butter. He's more of a keep a guy in front of you and make the tackle kind of player. So the moment you get him on your back foot, there's a very good chance you're either going to draw a flag or you're going to get the pass completed. That's exactly what happened. Krishan McCray was able to come down with the touchdown in the corner of the end zone. I thought it was going to take out my ACL for a second. The ball looked like it was going right at me, and I was fully concerned that if I didn't step out of the way, I was going to lose a kneecap. So very lucky to get out of that one. But yeah, I think that especially in the second half, this team stepped up. The effort levels that weren't there in the first 10 minutes were there throughout the rest of the game. And it was also nice to see that they were also able to take some of the starters out and give them a breather because it's a short week. We got NIU on Tuesday, so taking out the starters, letting them get a little bit of extra rest was definitely a huge factor and something that Coach Martin emphasized in the postgame.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up as well as anyone can, given that it was a gross game. But some not so gross things. Keon Mosey. Hello, Mr. Mosey. 196 yards, a 74-yard touchdown run, career high, by the way. I wish he would have gotten 4 more yards. Would have loved to seen him get 200. But yeah, both career highs. Miami basically just ran the ball in the second half. I mean, I would too. It was raining. It was cold. You're not going to, throwing the ball is going to be tough. Kind of gave me some like avocado cure bowl type vibes with all the rain.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like action. I texted my cousin Trey, and I was like, this is the best. A rainy Wednesday night, like it's time for action. But yeah, you said it the best. The weather played a role in the passing game for sure. Excuse me. Took the ball out of his hands after the lead was built. But yeah, I thought it was going to be a trap game. I said it in last week, and then when I saw 7-7, I sat there and I went, please, Lord, no, please do not let this be a trap game. We're so close to bowling. We're so close to getting back to Detroit after like just a terrible start to the season. So I'm glad that they were able to pull it out for sure.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mosey. Obviously, the run game was huge in the second half. I mean, it wasn't just Mosey. Kevin Davis also had a pretty big game, had a couple big runs. Jordan Brunson and Dylan Downing came in and made some nice plays. Obviously, the O-line, credit to them. I want to shout out, I forget who was playing. I forget who was playing center, but Keon said it in the post-game interview on the long touchdown run. Apparently, his center slipped. So he had to completely stop and wait for him to get back up, re-engage the linebacker, and then find the hole on the left side. But he joked about that. He also joked that he finally didn't get caught on one of his long runs. He was finally able to take it all the way to the end zone because especially I think it was against Central Michigan, I think he had 2 long runs that he was caught within the 5-yard line. So he was joking that he finally got in for a long score. Also want to shout out Brett Gabbert real quick. Eclipsed the 10,000 passing yards for his career. I think he's the only the 3rd Miami quarterback to ever reach that number. He is within reach of taking down Ben Roethlisberger's career number. He's got about 800 yards to go. Depending on how the rest of the season shakes out, he's probably got at least 3 games to get it, possibly 4 if the results go our way and we're able to get back to Detroit. That's obviously 200 yards per game. Hasn't exactly been what's the word I'm looking for? Hasn't exactly been expected of Gabbert this season. That's a number he hasn't reached super often, but it's possible. And one big game can put you within reach of a Super Bowl winning quarterback, which is a huge achievement. Obviously, Gabbert's been one of the best quarterbacks in Miami history, deserves to be among these record holders. So huge congrats to him. But yeah, the passing game was good. It was good in the first half. It wasn't super efficient. I think he had about 47% completions. But when he needed to make throws, he did. He got a little bit lucky on the first touchdown. It was a great throw, and he found Virgil, but I think some better tackling may have ended that play there and not allowed Virgil to take off for an extra like 40 yards. And then the second touchdown was just a matter of finding the open man. Javon was open. Javon Tracy was open. He was able to make 2 men miss, which he's done so many times this season, en route to the end zone, which I think is his 5th touchdown of the season, which leads the team, if I'm not mistaken. So the passing game was there. It was working when it needed to, and that's all you can really ask for, especially on a rainy night like that. I've said it. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Javon Tracy is going to be a star in college football. He looked the part again on Wednesday night. I am whoever Miami's next quarterback is. If Javon Tracy is still at Miami, he is going to be the number 1 option because he is just a huge asset to that passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it'd be cool if Gabbert got there to beat Roethlisberger, but I mean, obviously he's had a little bit more time to do it. Although I would like to see the game comparisons because look, I mean, Gabbert has been here for 6 years, but it's not like he's been healthy for all 6 years. So I wonder if he's like even played. And he also had a COVID season too. So like he only played 3 out of the 5 games that season, I think, or 6 games that season because he got hurt in that season too. So I think it'd be interesting. But moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we've kind of briefly touched on it. The defense met the expectations, and you know we're coming up on time, so we're kind of gonna rush through this to get a little bit of an NIU preview in. The first 5 minutes weren't great. Like you said, may have not fully respected Kent State. They are still you still got to play football, all right? Any given Sunday, but in this case, any given action night. But outside of the warning shot of that first touchdown, defense shut it down. I mean, the weather definitely helped, but the Miami defense is always very stagnant. So
Yeah. To answer your question, Gabbert has 49 career games at Miami. Roethlisberger had 38, so 11 more games. But obviously, two very different styles of play, two very different quarterbacks, two very different coaching styles.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about NIU before we wrap up here. Obviously, NIU is probably the MAC team that's made the most headlines this season, given their huge upset. I think it was week 4 against Notre Dame. So obviously, I think they're still in the hunt for Detroit as well, which makes this a very important game. Yeah, they're in the hunt still. Alongside like 5 other teams. We talked about like how there's like a possibility that there could be 6 teams in the race. Oh, actually, I was mistaken. NIU's kind of fallen out of it. They're 3-3, but they're not a bad football team. Ethan Hampton's proven to be a very good quarterback. Williams has been a good running back. So guys to keep an eye on. I think if Miami sticks to the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks, they should be able to take care of business and win this game. But obviously, with this close to the end of the season, there's no room for error. So
yeah, last game they played Akron. They played them last night. They won 29-16. Ethan Hampton, 9 completions, 105 yards, 1 touchdown. Wide receiver Trayvon Rudolph had a completion, 1 completion, 1 touchdown for 39 yards. So a little trickery was run.
there you go.
But yeah, like you said, no room for error. They also had a really ugly like weather game, so that kind of makes sense. But they had 2 100-yard rushers, which is crazy, and they almost even added a third. But Telly Johnson Jr. had 100 yards rushing, or 104 yards rushing. Gavin Williams had 101 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. And Trayvon Rudolph had 57 yards and 1 touchdown. So that's a lot of people to kind of make notes of, honestly. And it seems like NIU is really going to like kind of ground and pound, it looks like, possibly. And I think it'll be a real test for Miami. But you're absolutely right. There is 0 room for error because right now Miami sits at 3rd in the conference. They are 3rd in the conference. They are 6-4 overall. Bowling Green's also 6-4 overall. Ohio, as long as they don't lose within their next 2 games, they're making the conference championship. They're 7-3 overall, so the overall record I think holds weight because obviously they're first. But if both Bowling Green and Miami win next week, that final game between the 2 of them is determining who goes to the conference championship because Western Michigan lost and they fell down in the rankings. So they don't have they won't have a shot. Toledo needs a little bit of help, but it very well could be Miami versus Bowling Green to determine who plays Ohio in the title game. And honestly, if it's a battle of the bricks title game, that'd be so much fun.
Yeah, that would just be what a way to end, like, especially like Brett Gabbert's career and like this season as a whole. Like we talked about it a little bit, like starting this season 1-3 or 1-4 even, and battling back now to be 6-4, being bowl eligible and being on the verge of going to Detroit. Like we talked about in like after the Notre Dame game and especially after the Toledo game, that we weren't sure if this was going to happen. We were not sure if this team had what it took to battle through all the adversity that it's faced. And yet here we are in the middle of November, and they're on the precipice of going back to Detroit, looking for a 2nd straight conference title. So that's just a credit to this team. It's a credit to the coaching staff for making sure that this team is able to fight through the adversity that they've faced. And I mean, obviously we still got to get there. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch, but looking ahead to that Bowling Green game at the end of the season, that could be a game with a lot of fireworks, especially with the midweek action game. That could be really, really fun to watch. Obviously, Northern Illinois, got to get through that first. That game will be on Tuesday at 8 p.m. on ESPN normal, on regular ESPN. So national TV audience. Should be a good one. I will be there in person. It'll be my last football game covering Miami in person. So we'll have live updates for you on Twitter. And hopefully on Blue Sky, we're trying to get that page set up. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. But thank you again for listening for another episode of Red Brick Recap, our 10th episode. We've hit our first milestone, 10 episodes. we've made it. So keep an eye out next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Ted, thank you again for coming on this week. Any last thoughts before we get on out of here?
NIU likes to play the spoiler. We saw it when they spoiled Notre Dame, but hopefully Miami doesn't fall for it. So,
amen to that. Well, we will see you all next Tuesday for Maction's last appearance at Yager Stadium for 2024. Have a good week, everyone. See you next week.